Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which our institutions and communities are located and where we conduct our business. We pay deep respects to ancestors and elders, past, present, and future. We are committed to honoring First Nations peoples' continuing connections to land, waters, and culture. Welcome to this webinar. I am Associate Professor Abraham Francis and Head of the Social Work Academic Group at James Cook University, Townsville, and also a member of the AMHHEC committee. On behalf of the Australasian Mental Health and Higher Education Collaboration Organizing Committee, I would like to welcome you all to this third webinar in our 2021-2022 series entitled The Tapestry of Mental Health in Higher Education. The Australasian Mental Health Higher Education Conference, AMHHEC, as it was originally known, was established in 2017 as a community of interest in Townsville, Queensland, in response to the increasing need for action in the area of mental health and wellness in higher education sector and the broader community. AMHHEC has broadened its vision, goals, and strategic intent so that it will be better positioned to engage more effectively with the many mental health and well-being issues confronting staff and students within higher education across Australasia. Successful conferences were held at the JCU in 2017 and 2018. In 2020, the AMHHEC group expanded its reach, forming a joint collaboration between James Cook University and the Australian College of Applied Professions to launch a webinar series in the midst of COVID pandemic. In our webinar series, so far, we have separately discussed the well-being issues of staff and students in the higher education sector. In a webinar held in July 2021, presenters Professor Stephen Naylor from JCU, Professor Rachel Field from Bond University, and Vivian Brown from Origin provide us with rich and enlightening sessions that focused upon just some of the many mental health and well-being challenges faced by our academic staff within the contemporary higher education settings. Each webinar in this series is focusing on a different experience of mental health and wellness in higher education and the community. On 8th December 2021, AMHHEC also organized a fireside chat on well-being in the workplace. Jeremy Orders, Executive Manager, North Queensland Richmond Fellowship, and Associate Professor David Lindsay, from the College of Healthcare Sciences, James Cook University, discussed the impact of culture, strategy, and policy concerning workplace mental health and well-being challenges. Following on from this important discussion, we have two speakers today who will focus on the experiences of professional and technical staff in relation to workplace mental health and well-being. They will respond to the following questions. Number one, how has COVID-19 impacted your professional and technical experience now and moving forward? Number two, how does your role contribute to the facilitating student and staff mental health and well-being? And number three, what strategies have helped you cope with the changing landscape of higher education? Throughout this webinar, the chat function is active. We invite commentary and questions through this function during the webinar. Our team member, Dr. Vicky Hutton, is monitoring the chat room, and Dr. Vicky will provide a synopsis of comments and questions. Our student counselors are on call at the JSU and ACAP if you would like to discuss or debrief. With that introduction, let us now begin. I welcome our first speaker. Our first speaker is Professor Abhishek Singh Bhatti, who is the campus dean at James Cook University's Singapore campus. As a campus dean, Professor Abhishek contributes to JSU's initiatives in the tropical Asia. Welcome, Professor Abhishek, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Abraham, for that introduction. And very good afternoon, morning, or evening to participants who are joining from different countries. Well, first of all, I would like to thank Australasian Mental Health and Higher Education Collaboration Network, as well as ACAP, for this opportunity afforded to me to present. I am, as Abraham mentioned, speaking to you from Singapore, James Cook University Singapore campus. And you know, I think today's webinar and having a mix of speakers from Singapore and Australia is befitting to the Australasian focus of the collaboration network. So let me start. I have a presentation which I'll take you through in the next, let's say, 15 to 20 minutes. And I'm happy to take questions towards the end, or as Abraham mentioned. So I hope you are able to share I'm sharing my screen now. I hope you can see it. Just give me a minute. I'll get these sorted out. Are you seeing the presentation?
Yes, all good.
Fantastic. So the title of my presentation is Crisis Management in Pandemic Times, the challenge in achieving student outcomes and balancing mental health. And you know, it's more of a reflection from JSU Singapore, where I'm speaking to you all this afternoon. It's 12 o'clock here as well. This presentation is pretty much based on a reflective exercise, you know, and when the pandemic hit, it was a shock. People were in doubt, you know, hesitation, you know, unsure of what's happening, mental difficulty. And of course, in such a situation, you know, there is a retrospective inquiry that really helps in meaning making, and also in sense making of what happened and why what happened, was it right, what changes can be done, and of course, looking into new opportunities as well in the future. So that's just the core of this presentation. You know, 2020 was a turning point in education, as we all know, especially here in Singapore. In February 2020, that's when the pandemic first hit Singapore, and Singapore was on the leaderboard for the wrong reasons. Immediately after China, you know, China being the top nation at that point of time with number of infections, and followed by Singapore, and that led to a major disruption in higher education, and I think education in general, you know, which prompted people to move to, so in Singapore, a very popular 3-letter acronym, HBL, home-based learning for most of the schools and universities. And of course, for university sector, tertiary education, higher education like JCU, you know, we were grappling with either 100% online or blended wherever possible, depending upon what the situation was and is. You know, the situation that was presented to us in March 2020, it's still prevalent, and we are at the moment supporting students face-to-face and online. But as you appreciate, about 2/3 of our international students who are international to Singapore, coming from, you know, Central Asia, South Asia, East Asia, and Europe, they are still overseas. So we are certainly supporting them. You know, what happened in that duration is that, of course, COVID-19 or the pandemic accelerated digital learning and teaching, or here I've taken the liberty of putting teaching first because that's the focus, teaching and learning. So you would appreciate that this presentation, you know, here in Singapore, in JCU Singapore, we keep students at core to whatever we do here. We say that students comes first, and of course they come second at the same time. Having said that, while students is the focus, this presentation is pretty much keeping professional, technical, and of course some of the academic staff in mind, because it is this collaboration of technical, professional, and academic staff that led to some of the successful, sharing that I would have this afternoon for you all. And as this evident from this slide, when COVID-19 or the pandemic hit, of course, there were few challenges. Digital literacy of the academic staff who are going to teach, professional staff who are going to manage, various processes, as well as how to maintain the sense of belonging and identity, both for staff and for students. In the last 2 years, we've had several new colleagues who have joined, and a lot of them were working from home, just as students were studying from home. And it is difficult to inculcate the sense of, the cultural values in those colleagues if they're not been able to see and experience it for themselves by being on campus. So, that the lack of communication of identity and the sense of belonging, maintaining that definitely was one of the key things that added to this accelerated pace of edutech or digital learning and teaching. Of course, over the span of 2 years or so, or 20 over months, that's the more appropriate time period. We have looked at several ways of how learning, teaching, assessment, and of course, student, and staff mental health, mental well-being has been affected, has been taken care in the blended space, because I am on campus at the moment, but a few days ago, a couple of weeks ago, we were still following work from home here in Singapore. I guess the most important aspect in this entire conversation is mental and emotional well-being and the opportunity for social emotional learning, both for staff and for students. And you will find that the traces and evidences of various aspects that will lend themselves to mental and emotional well-being over time. Of course, when the pandemic hit, one of the things that we made sure for staff is that they don't feel, if you recall, I talked about sense of belonging, that the staff felt that they are connected. They don't feel that they are left alone and they are working in silos. So we had this weekly JCU care. It's an informal session where colleagues used to come and share their coping strategies, how they were, managing their work, managing their children who were also studying from home, and other aspects of just being based at home during the lockdown. That's what was called here in Singapore. Similarly, we also conducted several online workshops, for students to look into mental health series, mental health issues, about studying online, getting comfortable with online technology, coping and resilience workshops. So as you can see from some of the pictures on the left-hand side, these are actual workshops that were conducted. And if you can see some of the dates, they span throughout 2020, 2021, and even now in 2022, in order to make sure that people are mentally able, mentally sound, and mentally fit, so that their well-being is taken care of, and then they are able to concentrate and focus on either their studies or work for staff as such. One of the key challenges that we had from students' perspective was whether they were ready for online study, because professional staff and academic staff work really hard in making the content available for 100% online, but whether the students had the relevant, let's say, data literacy, information literacy, or digital skills to take care of, to absorb all the material and engage with the material appropriately. Whether they were able to have, be an independent learner, have a set of study skills, academic skills, that will help them, become, more appropriate and more confident with the learning outcomes. of the subjects that they're doing. So we started with the Digi Learn initiative. Digi Learn, as you can see, it was a collaboration with learning centers. We had full-time professional and technical, as well as some academic staff in learning center, campus activities, as well as our library colleagues. And what they did, they looked at conducting and facilitating seminars for students, so that we could make them aware of this different set of skills and literacies that were required in order to be ready for online study. There were simple things like students had laptops, but laptops did not have a camera, or even if they had proper equipment, they did not have sufficient bandwidth where they could engage in online sessions, whether it was through, because we in JCU, for participants who are joining outside of JCU, our LMS, the learning management system, is Blackboard based, and we follow the Blackboard Collaborate as our primary tool to conduct classes, the synchronous classes. But in addition to that, we also use MS Teams as well as Zoom to ensure that students were able to engage with the content effectively. The academic team, as well as the professional team and the technical team, they work together in creating a series of digital assets. As you can see, some of these assets were available on our website. They were sent to students in emails and other ways of communication, so that how students can cope with e-learning. It's not just the teacher perspective, but also student perspective. So imagine the technical staff had to get in touch with students who were not here in Singapore, were based in other countries, get their perspectives, and then put all them, in videos, digital assets that could be shared with the students online, and also inform all the students, current students as well as new students, that various support and help mechanisms are available for them to make use of. I would also like to give credit to EMAS. So those of you who are familiar with the Malay language, Bahasa, EMAS in Malay language means gold. And these EMAS are peer tutors who have worked tirelessly during the last 20 months, or let's say 2 years, in order to work with our professional staff as well as our academic staff to provide a range of virtual workshops and support meetings to students, so that students feel that it's not just that staff, but even fellow students who can reach out to, and students can relate better to some of the students. Some students can relate better to fellow students than reaching out to staff. Our student affairs did lots of activities for both staff and students. We had JCU is here for you, stay home with JCU. And what did these activities involve? Several physical activities, because when people, and as you imagine in Singapore, a lot of our students come from other, urban spaces where people are staying in apartments and they don't have a lot of space to move around. So having physical activities like wushu workout, having the yoga club did their yoga session on I think bi-weekly basis. The music club had Instagram Live for students and for staff, so that they could all participate and still feel that they're part of the JCU community, even if they were confined to the boundaries of their homes. As we continued to graduate students, and students as they graduated were very keen to join the workforce. So we had e-career fairs for students. And again, credit goes to our professional staff and of course to some technical staff who organize all the various seminars and activities, so that the e-career fair was launched. The marketing club had its activities, and so did other clubs, so that students feel engaged with industry. Students feel that it's not just theoretical knowledge, but they have fair share of the work integrated learning initiatives which were embedded in the curriculum, and of course make them work ready as they move on. With the help of our technical staff, we also made use of analytics, both immediate pulse survey. So instead of conducting a survey towards the end of the term, LTSC, which is the Learning, Teaching and Student Engagement Unit in JCU, they piloted the pulse survey to get to know how students and then even not just students, but even academic staff who are mostly teaching from home, at least in Singapore, are coping. And then, of course, then we collected range of data so that could then help us in assessing student experience and making refinements to our approach so that we can enhance student experience over time. The next few slides looks into some of the digital assets that we created for students, how to cope better. Our professional staff for exam department worked tirelessly to come up with range of videos again for students so that they can cope well. So again, it's the contribution of colleagues from various departments that they work together and how they helped each other so that there was this level of sense of teamwork, sense of collaboration, and of course, all going towards the single objective of helping students and making sure that student experience is not compromised. We emphasized a lot on the importance of communication. And of course, some of these are more relevant to students like lectures, tutorials, discussion forums, but even for our staff and other stakeholders, external stakeholders, regular announcements, emails, having sessions, weekly sessions, helped us maintain the contact with individuals, even if they were unable to come to campus and come together in large group settings. One thing that really helped us was the community of practice. And although the example here I've given is academic e-learning experience or community of practice where academics were learning from each other, but not only that, even our professional staff, they had community of practice on how we were assessing all our applications online, how student support was provided online, how counseling and well-being services were provided to students. So they were learning from each other, sharing good practices and improvements and of course areas where they can focus on. I guess the important bit, and this probably is one of my final slides here, is that whatever we do, of course we were moving at the speed of agile. If you were agile, then we could do things. But these were some of the key aspects of our approach that made JCU successful, at least in my opinion, in maintaining currency in student learning and ensured that we did not stop and students were able to continue on their education journey with JCU and graduate. We graduated over 2,000 students in the last 18 months. The focus was always whoever was the user. So whether it's the students, whether it's your internal staff, or whether it's an external stakeholder, it's really important that the person knew who your frontline, backlines are, and that you could, that focus remains crucial. Collaboration was key. Collaboration between technical staff, professional staff, academic staff, and as I said, even student body. So we had student council and MRs, which are the peer tutors. Different groups came together and worked together to ensure that we ride through the pandemic effectively. We made mistakes along the way, but we also made improvements so that we don't make those or we don't repeat those mistakes. So there were small steps, and those small steps over time, they resulted in big changes and of course, increased student satisfaction over time. One of the key underpinning factors were that we always had our eye on consistency in our processes and of course, making sure that we keep our quality of our processes so that we don't compromise on the quality, we don't compromise on student experience, as well as staff experience, how staff are managing and coping with one another. So on that note, I thank you for your attention, and I'm very happy to talk to you more about things that we can do in the future as well. Back to you, Abraham. Let me stop sharing now.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Abhishek, for sharing your experiences from Singapore. I think it was really eye-opening to see how you all worked together as a team. And some of the key words that came through were, the contribution of your colleagues. That's something you mentioned, the contribution of your colleagues. In fact, you talked about the teamwork, collaboration, and everything was really centered around student learning. And I'm sure, we could have more discussion on this, but just want to say it was really good to hear your perspectives and your experiences. And I'm sure our audience will also have some questions to ask you, or maybe, check with you in terms of they want to get more clarity, but we will pause for a while. I just want to take a moment and say thank you for sharing your views and experience. And now we will go to our next speaker. Meanwhile, my colleague, Dr. Vicky Hutton, is actually, compiling all the responses from the chat room. So we will discuss them later. But at the moment, let me now invite our second speaker for the day. So thank you, Professor Abhishek. Thank you. And we'll be back with you soon. Right. Let me now invite our second speaker for the day, Dr. Andrew O'Brien. Dr. O'Brien is Melbourne and Sydney campus manager at the Australian College of Applied Professions. He's very kindly agreed to join us today and share his experiences from Australia. So over to you, Dr. Andrew O'Brien.
Thank you very much. And just checking we can see my screen okay?
Yep.
And everyone can hear me okay. So thank you very much for the opportunity to come along. I guess just to outline the process or background for putting this together, I worked really closely with one of our campus leadership teams. And so their insights, which is 4 academic leaders and 2 professional staff, have guided this presentation. And probably to get in early and just be clear, the parts of the presentation which you think are worthwhile and valuable have come from those people. The bits that maybe missed the mark, well, that's probably my contribution, so we know where that lands. Just a little background to introduce, I guess, where I'm coming from, my sort of background worldview. My training is in, and my research is in sort of the management sciences. I'm a devotee of servant leadership, organisational learning, and a lot of my research has been writing learning histories, so capturing stories and pulling those apart to understand what might be happening. From a professional perspective, I've spent 30 years in senior student services, student affairs roles, and as a side hustle, work to promote people getting healthy and improving their lives by exercising with others. And it comes specifically to my COVID-19 experience, living in Melbourne. I think still holds the title for the world's most locked down city. That certainly has guided some of my experiences and insights into the impact of COVID. Right at the beginning of COVID, I also became responsible for the Sydney campus of ACAP, and one of my claim to fame there is on the second day of being the manager, we went into lockdown and closed up the campus. So people are not going to let me forget that one in a hurry. We've through Melbourne had some really interesting experiences where we were closed for such long periods and couldn't even access the campus. Had to get a permit to go outside the 5K zone to make sure that the campus hadn't burnt down, or that the rats and mice hadn't come in from the city and taken over. So some really interesting, I guess, experiences to cloud and guide, inform my experience of COVID and what it's done to our higher education experience. I'm going to quickly run through 4 key areas, the specific impact over the last 2 years, a couple of thoughts on what's ahead, some outline of the things we've done around mental health and wellbeing, and then my specific coping strategies. What have I done to get through and prosper, hopefully, by the end of COVID. So a few of the challenges and I guess opportunities. From day one, it's been one of confusion and uncertainty. What's happening? People looking for answers, hope, certainty. What's the next stage? And even as we're here now, almost 2 years down the track, we're still battling with changing rules and regulations and ways of isolating. And so with students wanting to be back on campus, but the ability of us to actually be able to deliver a consistent experience without worrying about students being told to isolate and then missing attendance requirements, being able to have certainty that our staff can teach and that we can cover when people need to go into isolation and or become quite ill with COVID. So this confusion and uncertainty continues to reign. The shift to living online at our Melbourne campus back in January 2020, our academic leaders and our IT support people got together and wrote version 1 of what it would be like to do everything online. At that point, we were still being told, no, we're going to stay on campus, it won't happen. But we were lucky that our campus leaders thought, and we just need to be prepared in case it goes there. And so we moved relatively quickly and seamlessly onto teaching online, to living online, to working online. Of course, challenging our view of everything from student services through to teaching was critical. So we had the view that we had to have a reception counter for students to physically come to. We had to have our student counselling service in a room with the counsellor. We had to have classes, in a building, and we couldn't do triads in our counselling program unless people were on 3 chairs and be able to move around the space. So a whole bunch of those challenges, which I know that you've all experienced. A big one for us has really been what I think we're referring to as the digital divide. I know I sit here at home with wonderful internet, couple of computers, great air conditioning, a window that I can open, a yard that I can walk in. I spent early days of COVID helping staff who live in small 1-bedroom flats, getting a chair and a desk to be able to put a laptop on to be able to do their basic works. We were lucky we had a librarian who did her utmost to keep our library open because of students without internet or without access to facilities. We put students in touch with secondhand computers, and I lost count of the number of times I shipped a dongle, a $40 dongle from Officeworks to the home of a student because they didn't have internet and they couldn't have access. So, the digital divide, whilst it enables digital, when looking online, enabled us in many ways. It caused grief for many, many people, and still does. One of the things which has benefited us was a setback early, but moving to new skills with Zoom, with Teams, with SharePoint, with apps and new technology. And our staff are talking now about things which they can do, which they just didn't imagine were possible. And that's flowed through into not just their professional life, but in other aspects of what they do. New ways of learning and service. So really, as I said, changing our perceptions of what was possible. And so the student consultation that used to be on campus 9 to 5 can now be scheduled at 6 or 7 o'clock in the evening via Zoom, and staff have the flexibility to work at the times that suit them and suit our students. Maybe it's a 2 or 3 hour break in the middle of the day because they're going to do an evening session, a different way of doing it. I went back in some study and doing a coaching program in breakout groups of 3 was rewarding, and I really can't say that there was anything different to being in a room face to face. We got immense benefit from a new way of learning, doing, and thinking about how things would happen. And productivity. For many people, no travel, a shift in use of their time has significantly enhanced the productivity. So one of my things I'm pondering at the moment is just thinking about returning to the office, is that 3 hours a day that I know I'm not traveling. Most days that's 2 hours for the college, 1 hour for me, and neither seem that keen to lose that time. So how are we going to focus or cope with returning to what we used to do when we've become to rely on is, we often talk about, I wish I had more time. Well, in some ways, COVID has given us a couple of hours more per day in many cases. And last but not least for me here is the notion of the isolation, the fatigue and wellbeing. And I found it particularly grueling that in a standard day's work, I might meet with 10, 12 or more people, and each time was some days with somebody who was really struggling. And so the need for me to be up and helping them each time and then go to the next one and almost have a similar conversation. You get to 6 o'clock at night and you sort of really know that you've been working hard each day. So looking after yourself became particularly important. And I'm sure we've got lots of people on the webinar today who in a better position to me to think about what's ahead for us in the years ahead. What's the lag impact of the way we've had to work in recent times. Next couple of years, a few thoughts. So online, blended on campus, making the most out of what have we learnt. Online means many things, and I think one of the things we're going to have to get better at is defining what that experience is. So it can be watching a video, self-paced learning, or it could be highly interactive, doing a counselling triad in a breakout room of a Zoom. So both are online, and so when students say, "Oh, I'm not too keen on online," part of the conversation is to work through with, well, what does that actually mean? And are there parts of online which you love, other parts not so much? And is it actually the online piece that's there, or is it the approach taken to the teaching? Flexible work and study. I think for many of us now, this is one of the crux of the issues of how do we find the sweet spot? What's the optimum time in the office for working with colleagues, for innovation, for being there for students, versus the time to get the benefits of working alone at home and the extra benefit for life that comes from that. What is that optimum? And so we're looking at some action research kind of studies to really capture this, learn from it, and each trimester continue to enhance. So again, turn the challenge into an opportunity. I think one of the issues which is ahead of us is this notion of the individual benefit versus the community benefit. So yes, it's nice for me to work from home every day, but what are my colleagues missing out on? What do I give to them in an office setting where we're together that enhances their work and their connection and our sense of community? So in some ways, it's not that dissimilar to the, do I get vaccinated or not vaccinated? Well, maybe I'm getting vaccinated for the good of the community. Well, maybe I'm going to the office to contribute to the community and to my colleagues, even if I don't think that it's necessarily, or I'm not aware of the specific benefit that I get. So getting that balance is going to be interesting conversations ahead as we try to optimise and come through. Embracing our new services. So for us, a big success was the Zoom reception, the Zoom counter, where no matter where they are, students can just pop in and talk to our frontline staff. So bringing this in and making it part of the ongoing. Students no longer needing to travel to the campus for a half-hour appointment when they can do it from anywhere at any time. So again, these are the things which I think we have a chance to frame in such a way that we really get the benefits in the years ahead. And again, I think another issue which is in front of a lot of us is the recruitment and retention. So we're reading in papers and articles about the Great Resignation and people changing for various reasons. Well, it is becoming a real challenge in terms of retaining people and recruiting and being able to create the conditions that people are now looking for. People have found a different way of working, and for those of us that are able to meet those expectations, then there's a great opportunity. For the rest of us who don't maybe set in the right direction, then that's going to be an ongoing difficulty that we face. In terms of some of the things which we've done around helping, and sometimes I suspect hindering, our mental health and wellbeing of our staff and students, connecting the campus teams and individuals. So that sense of belonging and recognising that sometimes we've been into overload with trying to create spaces to connect. Some people are just spending their whole life working online. So too much of the same, trying to find ways of getting it to work for individuals. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. A big focus for my work has just been listening and advocating. So what's going on? helping people feel heard and finding solutions to their problems, and then passing that through the college administration and management structure so that it can be understood, and that we can and been able to develop solutions which work for people, and that we're able to tap into and pick up on that great network we have of our academic staff and our professional staff talking to students every day and understanding what's going on. So, big focus of the work. Sharing and adding context. So when the Vice Chancellor or CEO talks to everybody at once through a webinar, people hear it in so many different ways. And so a key focus for people like myself at the middle management level has been to understand how it's being heard and to help people get the context right, how that actually applies for you. So when we talk about doing some things as a whole, well, if you're teaching an 8 o'clock class in the evening, then maybe that doesn't specifically apply to you in that way. It's then helping people make sense of it in a way which works for the community, works for individual students, works for the staff group. Flexibility. And so we've really tried to help people focus on, whether they be students or staff, on what are the outcomes, what are they trying to achieve, and to enable them to, as much as possible, determine and govern the way they do their work. So we have had some people who've loved to get up early and clear out those emails and write those papers and then take a break. Other people have wanted to do their 9 to 5 and pretend they're almost in the office and treat it in that way. So finding options which work for each person, connecting to their teams, being in service of their students, has been a particular focus of the work that I had to do. And I guess connected to that is treating staff and students as VIPs, and that is very individual people. The notion that I've found has been particularly important is giving people hope and vision. So, it's often in Victoria, it's been easy to say, well, we don't know when we're going to open. We've tried to turn that into, at this point, we're planning on being open in 6 weeks or 8 weeks. So even when we weren't able to hit those targets because of what was happening with COVID, we were at least giving people something to latch on, something to plan for, something to look forward to. And I think that has been a particularly important role that we've played on a day-to-day basis. And of course, we've had a whole range of college and corporate programs, from employee support to running yoga classes from home for students, various counselling programs and webinars and drop-in sessions and all of those kind of standard things. And so, again, connecting, making students aware, making staff aware, and recognising that not everything is for everybody. And so it's okay not to participate in some of those ones which don't work for you. So some people love to go to cooking classes, other people want to go to yoga classes. It's just been different and diverse. And the last but not least has really been about sharing success. So what's working, how are we learning from each other, how are we learning from others, and recognising the small steps along the way, what's kept us focused. That each little step has been great, and so much wonderful work has been done by people under incredibly difficult circumstances. Just to wrap it up with my few things which I've done to as they say, put the mask on yourself and keep yourself alive. We had lockdown 1. And like a lot of people, didn't eat too well, didn't exercise too much, thought this would be over in 6 weeks and then we'll get back to life. And the kilos started to come on and things started to fall apart. We then went back, and then a few weeks later we were back into lockdown. And so for almost 2 years since then, fitness and looking after myself has become a really important thing. So watching the CEO's webinar while riding the exercise bike, making sure that you go up early and do some yoga most mornings, doing the little things, and has become particularly important. Similarly, food. Being locked in your 5-kilometre area for a long period of time kind of helps and creates this, I don't know, it felt good to shop local, to go to the local butcher, to go to the local greengrocer, and to then cook and experiment and try some things which we normally wouldn't do. So healthy food, building on the kind of the exercise and fitness piece. Family, at one point, we had one member stuck interstate, another, a daughter stuck 8 kilometres away. We couldn't see it for months. Elderly parents, one particularly ill, couldn't get to see them. And so things like a family Zoom and the little connections, celebrating birthdays online together became particularly important to kind of keep us going. And those are things which other members of our team were sort of learning and sharing and comparing what they were doing to kind of help each other stick through. For me, personal goals became the little things, doing some of those things. So I did some study myself, a coaching program, learned about PERMA and as a model for helping with wellbeing, which was great because we can apply that not just to my own life, but at work in terms of those kinds of concepts. And to see that a lot of the things we were doing would fit that kind of a model, and there were some other things that maybe we weren't doing which we could add in, and so that was kind of handy. Now, working on those little renovation projects, planning about the holiday which might come, and I think we had 6 attempts before we could get that weekend away, and then sort of reflecting on the time of life where we're at, what comes next. So again, it created time for those things, and that all I guess helped get through and continue on. Learning from others. It was easy to go down the rabbit hole, as they say, with things are terrible here, but recognising that other companies, other universities, other countries were going through similar things and dealing with similar feelings, similar challenges, and to be able to see what worked and didn't work and to grow and learn from that. So that became really important for an individual and a collective context. Turning off. So at the end of the day, no Facebook, no phones, no technology. It was a complete debrief because with so much time online, there was a real need to escape. Didn't have that hour and a half traveling home from the office to kind of unwind. It was you're always kind of there and on. So turning off became particularly important. And last but not least is at the beginning, we a family habit of walking after dinner every night instead of sitting around and reading or watching television. So I think with the exception of 3 thunderstorms and lightning, we've walked for an hour pretty much every night for the last 2 years. And it's been one of those great times to reflect and debrief and plan and share and support each other. So that's my kind of snapshot and overview of the things which have helped us get through.
Thank you, Dr. Andrew, for sharing this wonderful presentation with us. I've been also looking through the chat room and found some wonderful comments. And I just want to say, the comment says, thank you, Andrew, for this reflective presentation. It has been most valuable. Many comments have come through the chat room. And I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your own personal perspective as well, along with what you have been doing in the sector. So thank you. And I'm just waiting to hear from my colleague, Dr. Vicky. But in the meantime, maybe if I could request Professor Abhishek also to switch on your camera video so that we can have a discussion now. I think one of the things that just came through from both these presentations is around fostering connection and creating a sense of belonging in your organization. I think both of you really highlighted that in your own ways. And I think the thing that I wanted to kind of check with you is, what did you do? How did you do? And what were the challenges that you faced as an organizer, as a leader within the sector? So just kickstart our conversations. So you all talked about creating and fostering that relationship, network, and everything. And I'm sure you've done a lot of stuff. But maybe to begin the conversation, what did you do? How did you bring both these teams together, both professional and academic and students, all of them together, and how you created that sense of connection? Any of you.
All right, if you don't mind, I'll go first. I think, Abraham, that's a very important aspect, sense of belonging. And to be honest, the sense of belonging goes a long way in maintaining a sound mental health and of course, towards well-being as well. Um, you know, what we realize, or at least my learning through the pandemic has been that a university or the buildings like what I have in my backdrop, they don't matter much. It's all about people. It's about your staff, which is academic staff, professional staff in an organization. And of course, when I say professional, I include the technical staff as well. And of course, students, who are the main stakeholders that make the cogs run. And it's really important that these key groups, they feel that they're part of the organizational culture. And in my instance, my example, JCU's culture. That level of sense of belonging is important. That's how you become part of it. How did we instill it? How did we make sure that it's there? One, by maintaining lines of communication, regular communication between teams for the entire organization. There were specific, and deliberate meetups between colleagues on Zoom, on Teams, or on Blackboard Collaborate, mostly with students, between students, so that those deliberate opportunities are there for them to share any of the issues that they're having, and at the same time also to build a common sense of understanding. And more importantly, also to be responsive. And that's where your cultural, or at least JCU Singapore's cultural aspect of being agile, as I presented in my very last slide, is important. Being nimble and agile is crucial so that you can respond to challenges that staff are facing. Andrew mentioned about, when people are working from home, whether they have appropriate work environments, whether they have a proper chair to sit on, whether it's, and these are simple things which we cannot take for granted. So organization needs to make sure that we are responsive. And in this manner, the various stakeholders feel that, yes, there is an identity. We belong to this organization. We care for this institution. And of course, we all want to work towards the same objective.
Thank you, Abhishek.
I think the bit I would, I guess, add as a summary for us was learning and failing fast. So we did a lot of things which we collectively thought were going to work. And then we found out pretty quickly, oh, that's not going to work. So as an example, in the on-campus environment, at the end of the week, there might be a morning tea or a group that will have drinks late on a Friday afternoon. And so we started out thinking, we'll do those things because we'll come together. And we did them for staff groups and we did them for student groups. And after about 2 or 3 attempts, people were saying, hang on, I've just been on Zoom since 8 o'clock this morning and I'm sick of this chair and I'm sick of this room. And I'm sorry, but I just don't feel like sitting back here at 5 o'clock and having a social chat or whatever every week. Let's just do this infrequently because it's not going to work. And we had similar kinds of things for students. So it was experimenting and really just letting things go quickly. Okay, try it, didn't work. Let's do the next thing. And I think that helped people then be more comfortable in being able to say, hey, this is not working for me. And it helped the communication to then move on.
Thank you.
Abraham, can I make one final comment when it comes to sense of belonging? Sorry, I think this is really important and it definitely worked for us. So consistency is key. And then when students and colleagues, staff, they did not have any physical cues to take hint from or to take advice, it became so important for us to ensure that we have consistency in our communication, whether it's happening through website and all messages are going through the website, or an email that goes out on a certain day of the week, or Blackboard Collaborate became the only platform where academic staff are reaching out to the students, or MS Teams became another platform where the staff will communicate. So such level of consistency then again fostered that sense of belonging, which was absent in a virtual environment. So I think that also helped us in a few ways. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. There are a couple of questions and comments that have come through, and thank you, Dr. Vicky, for combining all these things together. So if I may ask the first question to Dr. Brian. Okay, the question is this: really keen to explore this individual and community balancing question. And the comment is excellent to hear that you are also undertaking some research to generate an evidence base for this initiative. How important is this, and how would you take up this research, and what kind of initiatives will be undertaken? So that's just one question in terms of the research that you were talking about, the action research.
So we earlier this week for our Sydney campus leadership team, we explored this question in quite some detail, and so I outlined a kind of a couple of cycles of action research and how that might help us study. And we're basically looking at each trimester a separate cycle, and so we'll agree on how we're going to do it. We'll learn from it, and we'll make changes for the next trimester. But we'll change things short in the immediate thing if they're really not working. And it's a fascinating conversation because at one level we were all kind of engaged and excited with how good this could be, and at the next level we're all kind of flat, exhausted, fatigued, and thinking this kind of work lights us up, but at the same time we've got so much else to do. How are we going to do that? So it's early stages, but we left the conversation with a kind of a view that we better off to do something and nothing. We're better off to do something that's entry level rather than perfect. And so we're just designing a really simple process that's a conversation with each discipline, each academic area, with the professional staff. It's here's what we heard, here's what we think we'll do, get some feedback, adopt it, do it, learn from it, and go. So, we might be 6 months, 12 months off developing that to the next level and getting ethics approval and taking it there, but we're really using the action research into the management action learning framework to how we bring people back and how we create a framework for listening and learning with what's working and not working. Because we do have, people who just want to be in the office every day, and we have other people who think they never need to come to the office. Yep. And there's fairness, there's equity, there's all so many issues. It's such a rich, complex, wicked problem, dare I say it. And so how we tackle that in the months and years ahead, I think is going to be critical for us in recruiting, retaining, doing a good job for our students, and encouraging everyone to be learning from this, coming out better to the other side.
Yep. Thanks for sharing that. Professor Abhishek, I have a couple of questions that have come through. I'll read two of them. One is about online study. So the question is, ready for online study programs would involve many professional staff. How did you help them cope with the pressure? That's number one. Along with that question is, would be keen to know or keen to learn how the 24-hour hotline worked for students and staff.
Well, thank you for those questions. Those are really practical but important questions and considerations that even we went through as we were planning. So, even as we speak, we are supporting students face-to-face, 100% online, and blended, the three modalities. The reason why we want students to come back to campus face-to-face so that they don't start complaining that they're getting a lesser experience, and online petitions would start about discounting fees and things of those sorts. We want to make sure that we maintain face-to-face and of course invite students back on campus. But as I said earlier, we also need online presence so that we can reach out to the students. For James Cook University, Singapore, we start a bit late. Our academic year starts a bit late, and next week is our first trimester of the year, and of course, that's when it starts. So this is O week, and 4 days in this O week are dedicated to Digi Learn. But I did share a slide there where there are about 20 hours of activities in those 4 days, 5 hours every day, 20 hours of activities and presentations and workshops for students who are in Singapore or overseas, so that they can really have a good appreciation of what to expect from JCU, what is their role as a student in order to benefit the most from the content. A lot of our students in China, they cannot access half of the content because of firewalls and other things. So we have dedicated VPN, which we got through from Ali Cloud. And it costs us a bomb, but who cares? It's about maintaining continuity. That's important. And that's the reason why we had loads of students coming from China into JCU Singapore. But anyway, that's a separate matter. So the point here is continue the conversation on whichever platform we can through training students, provide them with additional help and support. For teachers or academic staff, tutors, we have teaching pods. So several of our labs, psychology labs and other labs, they became redundant. So what we did, the small cubicles which were used to conduct phone calls for data collection, we have converted those small cubicles into teaching pods. So there are about a dozen teaching pods on campus, and students are able to use these staff, sessionals and full-time staff who may not have the most appropriate teaching environment at home. They can come to campus and they have all the facilities, equipment, multiple screen, and annotating facilities and everything else. So I think that's perhaps the first bit of the question, which is how do we prepare and make sure that everyone is continue to be ready for online learning. Sorry, Abraham, I've the second question slipped my mind. Can you remind me, please?
The second question was about the 24-hour hotline.
Yeah, 24-hour hotline. And again, this is where it's a collaboration between JCU A&S, James Cook University Australia, and JCU Singapore. We are 2 hours behind. So we provide, our staff provide help or after-hour helps to colleagues and to students from Australia. And similarly, colleagues from Australia, then JCU Australia, they provide early hours help for students from Singapore. So we've got this collaboration going where it can be extended over time. And although it's just 2 hours different, but 2 hours extends 2 hours, so 4 hours of after-hour support that we can provide without having to get extra resources. And this support is also extended over public holidays. And luckily, Singapore public holidays are different from Australian public holidays, and then colleagues can provide that help during after hours or on leave. And that's a collaboration between colleagues here in Australia. What we did is, because most of our staff were working from home, we also tried to tell them that if there are any requests that comes slightly later in the evening or so, and if you're available, try to make use of and respond to that request. So that was kind of going the extra mile, but of course, it wasn't at the cost of their personal time. But that leads to another point, but I'll save that if that comes up at a question, but I will raise it at the end, another issue. So Back to you, Abraham.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Abhishek, for sharing that response. I've got a number of questions more, but anyway, I just want to club some of them together. And maybe this is addressed to both of you, Dr. Andrew and Abhishek. The question is this: I would be curious to know, whilst willingness to adopt is essential, how is resilience being addressed in order to ensure students feel confident in their ability to cope with this said change?
All right, I'll go first and then to Andrew. Well, I think resilience, or as a skill, to be resilient is one of the most important skill in well-being. And a lot of our students take cue from what they see around them. So from the interaction with academic staff as well as professional staff, that how to remain resilient. Few things that really help in resilience, and this goes back to one of the earlier conversation, Abraham, that's about sense of belonging and identity. If people have the level of confidence and trust, they definitely are better prepared to manage things. Second important aspect, which again was certainly evident in JCU Singapore's case, is the cultural value of being nimble and agile. If you have that aspect of being nimble and agile, then you would respond to situation, and responding to situation will keep you resilient, will make you resilient to respond to any changes in what happens. Third important aspect, maybe this is cultural, maybe that at least in Singapore, where we have, vast majority of our staff and even student population is of Chinese background, and as because of being ethnic Chinese, they tend to be certainly more resilient in their approaches, and even they're more compliant in the ways. So if there is less argument, conflict, differences, then that helps in taking the agenda forward and making people more confident and comfortable with changes that are happening.
What I would add to that, and I think this first part cuts across a lot of this conversation, is I think we need to work harder and get better at reframing the possibilities. And we tried to do this early on, and then I think we probably dropped the ball a bit, but I think it comes back to it now. So for students, I take a counselling student, for example, who was thinking that they're going to get through their course and they're going to work for an organisation or open their own practice, and they're going to do face-to-face counselling. What we've just been through is, and going to continue through, is this incredible, once in a lifetime opportunity for us professionally to now be able to do that work with people anywhere around the world. I can now sit at home and do human services work one-on-one with people in small groups all around the world, because one, I've learnt to have to be able to use the technology, connect and communicate online, and I wouldn't have had that opportunity if it wasn't for this. And two, my clients, the people I'm going to work with, who thought they needed to come and see me face to face, and now a whole lot of them are thinking, oh, I don't have to travel to go and see them. I can just see them from my office or from my home. That's much more convenient. I'll take that. And so the clients potentially becoming more willing, and the students, the graduates, are becoming more capable. And so then for those students, there's then what are you learning in your profession that also enables you as an employee, as a professional staff person, whatever you might be doing, to make yourself more employable in any number of other areas. And so for that then makes the shift to us as staff, employees, professionals, that I was thinking, when I'm finished with full-time work, there are certain things I can do. I have to maybe I'll do some lecturing for 10 years because I can't do the management stuff if I'm not face to face. Well, the whole world's opened up for me now. Now I can do the management stuff. I've got more choices. So for me, it's then links to this notion of resilience for students and staff. The possibilities are greater. And if I see more possibilities, then the part of that helps me. I'm going to hang in there. I'm going to put up with this COVID challenge because I'm getting not just my work or my degree, but I'm actually getting extra skills, I'm getting extra capacity, and I'm in a better place to create a better future. And so that kind of all links together and addresses a whole bunch of things, one of them which is resilience, I guess.
Yeah. Just on that, Andrew, I had a comment that came through. It says this: not losing sight of me in the midst of the journey, critical for mental well-being, and respecting this within our staff teams. I think that's a very strong view, and that has come through. And I just thought asking that to you in terms of how did you see yourself and what can we learn from your experience, because you are leading a team and you are also looking after yourself. So and you're talking about the resilience part of it and looking at it from the student's perspective. So how hard that was for you? Or was it a challenge, or you just made it happen?
No, I'm kind of fortunate that for fun, I like to do. My wife and I run ultra marathons, and so a lot of our weekends is spent about just putting one foot in front of the next when you think you can't go any further. And so for me, that metaphor or that lesson just comes into work. It's like one meeting, one person, one challenge at a time, and the old thing of, well, as long as you keep moving forward, you'll get there. It might take a bit longer, but you will get there. And the only way you won't get there is if you stop. And so I think for a lot of us in the depths of the worst of the COVID thing, it was just a case of, okay, who am I going to help next? what's the next little thing I can do to make a difference to somebody? How can I cheer somebody up? How can I help somebody re-look at it and go, yeah, okay, there's a way forward. And just those little steps, little victories, I think was the thing that helped get a lot of us through.
Thank you. That's wonderful to hear from you. Abhishek, there's a question associated with the students' response. Like we have been doing a lot of things, but the question is around, while connection is so important, I would be interested to know that what the engagement was with students watching the recorded videos or involving themselves in extra curriculum workshops, etc., which you talked about. What was the kind of or the level of engagement from the students' point of view, and did that add pressure to the staff in a way?
Yeah. I think we do have people from learning and teaching in the audience, and that's why such questions are coming through. But these are really important questions. When pandemic hit us in February 2020, we had 3 weeks, literally 3 weeks to move from 100% face-to-face to 100% online. Now that's a big ask. We are talking about, I think, because if you recall, I mentioned earlier that early March is when we have our first study period commences, and that's when we were supposed to move online in early March in 2020. So as we did that transition, as we moved all those about 250 subjects which were offered, we moved all those subjects online. Of course, it wasn't perfect. We knew it, but the important thing was at that point of time to provide that continuity, because that continuity would help assure students and even staff that yes, we are moving forward and will make changes. So initially there was a lot of hiccups in terms of students engaging with not just students, even academic staff, even professional staff engaging with technology, and technology was not perfect as well. So that kept improving. Even the way the content was provided earlier, at times we even had 3-hour online synchronous lectures. That was, I'm sure this would be very painful for students just to stare at a screen where a person is talking for 3 hours, rather than engaging with them. And over time, now we have split our content into some is self-directed learning, some is synchronized e-learning, other is asynchronous online content. And of course, in some small group setting, they can come to campus and do tracks and lab sessions and tutorials. So it's primarily become blended in approach. And then with time, we've also had students to engage. I have a funny anecdote to share in terms of engagement and in terms of draconian rules of Singapore. As you know, Singapore is a fine city, and fine can have multiple meanings. One of the rules that we have is that all our international students should have 90% attendance. Now, when we moved online, we didn't know whether the international student is in Singapore or overseas. It took us time to get to that information. But till such time, we had to report to the Ministry of Education, that we are collecting student attendance, and that was through the attendance on online platforms. So many students would, switch off their cameras. They would be there, but they not be there. So again, that became an issue, how to engage them. So we conduct several workshops. And again, our colleagues in LTSE were very, very helpful in conducting workshops at that point of time, how to engage students, how to throwing questions at them, getting them to work in small groups so that your 2-hour, 3-hour of session still continues to be live. So yeah, there were a lot of learnings. There were some, of course, field experiments, but as I said, eventually we got there. And now I think JCU, just like many other institutions, are quite comfortable with delivering content online and even 100% online.
Yeah. Thank you. I like to read a few comments that came through. You don't have to respond to that, just for the sake of understanding what kind of discussions were happening, and also the ideas that came through. Some comments are, love the concept of JSU's Carer Connect and the online series for students, great initiatives. Utilizing the experience of peers is really effective. Lived experience counts for a lot. Maintaining contact to keep connected, very important. Thank you so much for sharing such a valuable insights and So interesting to hear your approach and the support mechanisms provided. Thanks for sharing the initiatives valuable for mental health and student well-being. A silver lining for COVID staff upskilling with the communications and technologies. Self-care is critical. Looking after one another is very important. Love the vibe of working around colleagues. I could go on reading the kind of comments that came through. I just wanted to share them with you as well while we're having this conversation. I'm also mindful of the time. I mean, we could go on talking about this, but just being mindful of the time. So probably, if I may ask Professor Abhishek and Dr. Andrew to give us what are the take-home messages for us? Maybe 1 to 2 minutes.
Sure, Andrew, if you don't mind, I'll start first. So I'll talk about two things here. One is the importance of collaboration, and trust me, I only realized it through this experience that how powerful is shared knowledge. In one of my slides, I mentioned community of practice, and then these COPs were like probably the most effective tool that we had. So we had COPs of academic staff, professional staff, and these community of practices were nothing but sharing sessions, where people would just talk about what worked, what did not work, learn from each other. And in the last 18 months, I've also attended more webinars than I did in probably last 10 years, So a lot of ideas I learned from those webinars as well, and online sessions. So not just me, but other colleagues, and they learned from those experiences, and that collaboration definitely helped in moving forward, in learning, unlearning, and relearning, certainly. A very important aspect, which I mentioned earlier that I will touch upon. The very first question that we discussed, Abraham, was more about connectedness, But I think there's a flip side to that as well, and that is how to put a line to connectedness, because several staff, and this goes to professional staff and academic staff who are working from home, they found it very difficult to draw a line where to stop when it comes to working, because your work and your leisure and your play and your home, everything became the same space. So when you're in the same space, and that space is 10 by 10 or 10 by 12, as what happens in Singapore, then you don't have that sense of time or spatial reality. You miss that bit. So we again had conscious emails sent, and there were these programs which were led by our colleagues we have quite a successful clinical psychology program here. So some of them who are working in mental health, some colleagues, they together with our wellness team, counseling and wellness team, we came up with some programs for staff, mostly for staff, to talk to them and train them how to manage time and how to compartmentalize time, how to finish up work, and then not to answer emails at 2 a.m. at night. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrew, over to you.
I think starting or highlight for me is that our students and our staff at all levels have the answers, that they know what the challenges are, and they've got ways of solving those. And the exciting opportunity for people like us is to connect them and to bring those together. And so with that, we all know more than we collectively than we do individually. And so whether it's helping the Vice Chancellor understand what's happening at the front line, or helping the front line understand the broader context that the Vice Chancellor is dealing with, and everybody in between. So, to have that opportunity to connect deans with junior academics and students with the provost or whatever it might be, I think that's the answer. That's the way through, and that's the exciting opportunity that we have. And the other thing which comes up for me listening to Abhishek talk then is, an example for one of my teams is they meet they're a frontline team. They meet every Thursday 5 o'clock for half an hour to an hour. And it's outside of, it's after they finish work, but it's become their thing and they do it and it works really well. And they talk mostly business, but they have a bit of fun and it goes nicely. And they're pondering, what will this mean when we go back to the office? Because there's a dash for 5:15 bus or train. Because if I don't get the 5:15 bus, then I don't get home until, after the kids are in bed or whatever it might be. And so we've come to rely on people putting in place these kinds of initiatives, using some of their productivity and time dividend to give back and do more. And how the heck are we going to address that? And what's the impact of that going to be? And it does worry me that the impact on our well-being and mental health around some of those challenges, if we over expect of people, or we aren't flexible enough, there could be some tough times ahead in dealing with those things. So lots more questions and answers, I'm afraid.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm just mindful of the time. So I take this opportunity to thank both our speakers today, Professor Abhishek and Dr. Andrew, for sharing your presentations with us, your views, and participating in these conversations and giving more insights. And I think these are conversations. We don't stop here. I think we continue to have these conversations. And I think in this series of webinar, that's what our aim is, to have these conversations. We can have these similar conversations in our context wherever we come from, in my campus, in your organization. So those of you are listening to us, maybe you can take these conversations into your own context of practice, areas of work. So as we conclude today's webinar, I'd like to sincerely thank our presenters for sharing their experiences and insights with us today. Thank you also to our participants who have joined us from many parts of the world and from many universities, far and wide, who have joined us in this webinar. My appreciation to AMHHEC Organizing Committee for your generosity of spirit in volunteering your time and skills in the preparation of our 21-22 webinar series. And special thanks to my colleagues, Claire Ovasca, Professor Margaret Carter, Professor David Lindsay, Jeremy Orders, and many others, Simone, many others who have joined us. I just wanted to thank all my colleagues who have really worked hard behind the scene to make it happen. So I want to thank all my colleagues who are part of the AMHHEC committee. Thank you to all of you. And of course, participants, thank you for joining us today. You will receive an email in the next few days with the link to this webinar and a short survey. Please complete this survey as it helps us customize our future activities and offering. I also want to really thank my colleague, Dr. Vicky Hutton, who has been helping us with compiling all these messages. So thank you, Vicky. And of course, I want to take this moment once again to thank all of you together here and say, we have done it together. We have started this conversation. Let us continue this. And a reminder that our next webinar is scheduled for the 6th of July, 2022, with a focus on mental health and wellness experiences of researchers and higher degree students within the university settings. So I, once again, thank you, and bye for now. Have a great rest of the day, and we look forward to meeting with you all at the next webinar in July. Thank you so much.